take a nature walk with me. We're gonna check out some really cool trees. We're gonna hang around and talk about all those things in nature that we can't live without. Let's go get nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature, baby. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Come on, let's get nerdy about nature.
What is up, everybody? Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Nerdy About Nature Podchat series. My name is Ross. I'm going to be your host here on this audio-visual adventure into the outdoor world. And today, I'm incredibly stoked to bring you a conversation that I had with Indra Hayre on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Now, Indra is an incredibly amazing, well-spoken, and inspiring young woman of Indian descent, and she does a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm of the outdoor sports world. And in this conversation, we talk a lot about what it was like growing up as a young brown woman in a world dominated by traditionally white males, and also what it means to racialize the outdoors. So really great conversation. I think it's really pertinent in these times. There was a slight bit of a hiccup at the beginning of the episode. I mean, you know, it's actually kind of uncomfortable to talk about. I'm kind of embarrassed. So I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to let you all, with your naturally inquisitive minds, pick up the pieces and figure out what happened. So without any further ado, here we go. Well, that's embarrassing. Round two. We just talked for like 20 minutes and I totally forgot to hit record. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Well,
we're working out the kinks.
We're working out the kinks. It's new. I'm still getting used to talking into my own head here. Wow. Episode 2. Indra Hayre, welcome to the Nerdy About Nature podcast. Take 2.
It's better the second time
How
around.
How are you doing?
I'm so good.
Oh man, I feel like I'm having deja vu right now. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much
welcome
for having
to my
me.
cozy little gazebo rain shelter.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's nice to be outside.
It's got character. It's a little rickety, but
it's standing.
It works.
So that's good.
Yeah. Would you like to start by, I guess, giving us a little bit of an introduction, who you are and why you're here?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Indra. My pronouns are she, her, and I currently live on the unsurrendered land of the Sḳwx First Nation. But I'm super grateful to have grown up in and around the unsurrendered land of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations in Vancouver. I grew up and have spent my entire life on the West Coast, so I'm really, really grateful for that. And I would say that the reason I'm here today is because I'm a massive advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of life, but with a particular huge passion for it within the snow sport community and within the outdoors in particular.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a little bit about growing up in Vancouver. What was that like?
It was interesting. So I grew up in Vancouver, and both of my parents immigrated here when they were about 3 years old. So my dad from India and my mom from England, but she's also Indian as well. And so grew up at kind of what I would consider like a second generation Canadian because my parents came here so young, but grew up in a very like quote unquote westernized style of living. And so very much like always in very white spaces and always the only child of color in these white spaces. And so that was always like something that I could feel, even though I didn't really have like the vocabulary to like express it or really understand what I was feeling. I'd play all these sports and I'd go to my French immersion school, and just something in me knew that I was different, even though like no one was saying it. So it was always a really interesting upbringing because there were other Indian folks around me, like massive Indian communities in the suburbs that I grew up in. But because of the way in which, you know, my parents put me into different sports and a French immersion school, I wasn't actually in those spaces. So I was still kind of like
those Indian spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
Very much like assimilating to like the white Canadian culture.
100%. And so that always kind of like, it definitely stuck out to me. But I just didn't really have the words for it until much later in life.
And Yeah, this is so foolish. Like, I can't believe that we just went through all that conversation and have to do it again. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, podcasts are killing me. You were talking earlier in our previous conversation about, growing up and feeling almost superior to like other Indian kids, and like the element of like your friends like whitewashing you. And
yeah, totally.
what was that like as a little girl growing up?
Oh my gosh, like now that I can be outside of that just say like there was so much internalized racism because I was raised to like assimilate into these white spaces, and not raised by my parents, but like raised by the spaces around me and raised by the society that I was in, where like my friends would say things like, you know, like they'd say something about Indian people and then be like, but not you, Indra, because you're not really Indian. Or they'd be like, Indra's like super whitewashed. And I would be like, yes, like, thank you so much. What a great compliment you have bestowed on me, because there's no difference between you and I. Like, I am white, just like you. And it's like,
I'm fitting in.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And it was just like a huge compliment. And so, yeah, I felt this weird like disconnect and this like superiority level between me and other Indian kids, where I'd be like, look at me, I'm like white and like you're still like Indian. And it felt like I was like more successful in the assimilation. Like I was like ahead in the race of assimilating. And now I look back on it and I'm just in the race of assimilating.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, like
the verbiage there is strong.
It's so, and I look back on it now and I'm you know, I was so disconnected from culture. I don't really carry any like Punjabi roots with me to any large extent, and I feel jealous of those other kids that like got to, you know, stay connected to culture and find community through culture. I guess I just wish I had more of like a balance between the two spaces in which I come from.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And I think like before we move on, I just want to mention, because I'd mentioned it earlier, but not in this recording, that, yeah, like I really wanted to have you on because like we did a panel conversation the other night at a place in Squamish here downtown. And you just had like some really amazing things to say about the whole element of like diversity, equity, and inclusion in the outdoor spaces. And I was like, dude, I need to get some of this. I need to get some of this on the podcast because, yeah, like a majority of the Nerdy About Nature followers, I'm assuming, just based on the people I've interacted with, are about 80% white people who enjoy the outdoors. And I think that these are really important conversations to have to kind of like expand that and recognize that everybody is accepted and welcome in these spaces.
Totally. And even if we think about that event the other night, which was so amazing and so fun, I think there were like maybe 2 people of color in the audience. Like I was just like looking out there and I was like, okay.
Primarily female too.
And a primarily female audience. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, like who is, but it's nice to look at like who is wanting to listen to these conversations. Cause I do think that it's like a demographic that does need to be listening. And there is that like desire to listen and learn. I do wish there were more men amongst that group who were willing to listen and learn, but I think that that's where there's some benefit in having these conversations on your platform too.
Yeah, but men are arrogant. Like straight up. Like I think that if you can get those women there, like just assuming that they're kind of like straight normative people, like they're going to interact with their male friends or partners and be able to like impart those things on them and hopefully let them grow. Because otherwise men are just like, we're like, especially in Squamish, it's like, dude, how sick is that line right now, dude? Oh my God. The dirt is firing right now. So yeah, I think it's not like the end all be all where we would hope to be, but it's progress.
We're getting there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Change is slow and change happens one bit at a time.
Apparently. Yeah.
So growing up in Vancouver Indian family, being like just assimilated into white Canadian culture. You're playing hockey. You're playing, what was the other game you had? Hoops? Ringette, yeah. Hoops. Wow.
Basketball?
Yeah, I don't even know. Ringette, which is like the field hockey version of hockey on ice, I'm assuming.
It's like its own full thing.
Yeah.
It's like hockey, but no blade on the stick and a ring.
Right.
It's faster than hockey. It's great.
Faster than hockey?
It's faster than hockey.
Sounds mildly entertaining.
I'd say so.
I'm not much of a organized sports guy, but I could sit through a game and small talk with somebody while half paying attention to that.
Yeah, eating a hot dog.
Yeah, veggie dog.
Veggie dog.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So what was it like, kind of growing up in that in those environments? Like,
It was, it was awesome growing up. Like, my parents gave me everything that they wished that they had growing up, like we did all the organized sports, we did French immersion schooling, we went to Disneyland, like we did all of those like things that I think that they wanted, which I think is in essence what the American dream kind of is, like especially for immigrants. It's like coming to Canada and creating a better life and making it big and giving your kids everything that you had wished you had, even like the Barbie dolls and all of that kind of stuff. So
a better life from like a consumerist perspective.
Exactly.
It's the marketing of it all.
It's the biggest. I have so much to say about the American dream. But
want me to bookmark that? I'm going to write a little note here. We'll come back to that at the end.
Yeah, we can.
Indra's thoughts on the American dream. Stay tuned.
It's a lie.
It's going to be dramatic. I can feel it.
But it was an awesome upbringing. But I think it came with so many, just like so much like internalized shit that I didn't realize until later in life, like that internalized racism that I was talking about. Like there was so much that I was going through that I just never had like the words to express about it. Like, yeah, being the only Indian kid in all of these spaces, like having your food get made fun of, not wanting my grandmother to walk me to school, which I'm like so embarrassed about because like she would be wearing Indian dress. I remember once like going to like an Indian party and then my parents wanting to quickly make a stop and go to an errand, like run an errand afterwards, like go to Home Depot after like an Indian wedding. And I was so embarrassed to be like walking around in like Surrey in like my Indian attire, which is beautiful regalia, but I was embarrassed. And so there was just so much like, I felt like I had like one foot in each culture, but like I really didn't want my foot in like the Indian culture at all. And then I went to university. I went to UBC and did a degree in sociology. And I think I would have been like 21 when I started doing sociology classes. And that's kind of when I was given this like massive toolbox of language that like finally made me really understand everything I'd been feeling all those 21 years prior, where it was just like, oh, like this is what double consciousness is. It's like when you hold these multiple identities and you never actually really feel like you belong in one of the boxes. So it's like I held these identities of being Indian and being Canadian, but I was never Canadian enough to be fully Canadian because I'm not white. So people would always be like, where are you really from? And I'd be like, I was literally born in Richmond General Hospital. Like, I don't really know what your question is here. And then in the same breath, not Indian enough to fit in with the Indian kids because we had different like family experiences growing up. We had different connections to language, different connections to culture. So it's just kind of like having these identities and not really feeling like you belong into either party. And then like, yeah, again, just like so much language from my sociology degree that made me be like, oh my goodness, this is what I've experienced growing up. It really helped me define what my relationship to like snow sports was. And then I feel like I'm very much like an educator by nature. Like I really love teaching people and I really love having conversations that meet people where they're at. And so once I was given all this language from sociology, I was like, I can use this to like relate to other people. I can use this to help other people put words to their own experiences. And I can also use it to explain my experiences to my peers that have never been able to understand kind of what I've been going through before. So I think that was like a massive turning point for me. It was just like that degree in sociology was like huge to get me to like where I am today.
Yeah. I mean, I can just imagine it giving you such a deeper understanding of all those like emotions that as young angsty teens do, just like bottle up and don't ever talk about.
Totally.
So you mentioned like not being Indian enough to like get along with like the Indian community down around Richmond. Did you have much Indian influence growing up? Like from you had your grandma.
Yeah, I had my grandma. I had two grandmas for most of my upbringing. One was very connected to culture and still is, and the other one was like connected, but not really. I have one grandmother who's still alive who like prays every single day, like does her prayer morning and night, like very religious. And I think she's been like my biggest influence on culture. Both of my grandmothers like cooked Indian food And so that was like a large part of my life growing up as well. But I didn't like Indian food until like maybe my like late teens.
Was that like a subconscious thing? Like you didn't want to like it?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And it was one of those things where like,
because it's delicious.
it's so good.
Yeah.
And I'm so angry that I was like averse to it for so long. But like, I think something that a lot of kids of color experience is what's called the lunchbox moment in elementary school, where like you bring something of your culture to school and then all the kids are telling you that it's like smelly and weird and gross. And then all of a sudden you're just like, I hate my culture. Like my friends are making fun of me and like I'm different than everybody. And so like it just really put off this like entire connection to the food. And then you grow up and everybody wants to eat Indian food. And I'm like, really? Like now?
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm all about that Bengan Barta.
It's all so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't have a ton of Indian influence growing up. And I think it's something that I'm like really seeking out these days.
So, and you have like resources to get into that? Like you said, you have your grandma.
I have my grandma. That's kind of about it.
Yeah. No other family ties or anything like.
We're all here. Like,
did your parents immigrate like with their brothers and sisters and stuff, and nobody's kind of embraced that?
Everybody's here. My mom.
But nobody's embraced any of that Indian culture. Like they've all just.
Yeah, we've all just like it was like a group journey to like assimilate. I have two older cousins on my mom's side who both had very traditional Indian weddings, and then one of my cousins is also having a traditional Indian wedding this year, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah,
it's gonna be massive. It's like a full 6 days.
Yeah.
Like,
those sound like the most fun things in the entire world.
It's going to be incredible. And I'm really excited because it's giving all of us like an opportunity to connect with culture. And I was really young when the other two weddings happened. So like I didn't understand all of like the meanings behind the different pieces of the wedding. I didn't understand the meaning behind each event. So I'm really excited to like get more in the conversation with my aunt while she's planning my cousins this year and like actually have an understanding of like the importance of these pieces because they're so beautiful and they're so intentional. And like, yes, it's like 6 days of partying, but it's intentional.
It's a full 6 days? I didn't even realize it was that long.
I thought
it was like a weekend, you know?
No.
That's amazing.
It will be incredible.
I know, because like from an outside perspective, like all I ever hear about it is, stuff from pop culture and stuff.
Yeah.
The new girl wedding that gets crashed. Like,
yeah.
And I would love to experience something like that. It sounds.
Well, I mean, like everybody invites everyone and their mom to their wedding. So if I do a wedding, you can come to mine.
Yeah, I would be stoked to go. Yeah.
It's on the air now. So
man. Yeah, we've got it. It's recorded twice now. We have a camera and audio actually recording. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So those are kind of like they're very like loose cultural ties, but yeah, you and I were talking about this the other day. It's kind of like, I think that I'm in a position that a lot of children of immigrants, quote unquote, find themselves in after, this, when you're kind of in that like second gen mentality of immigration. My parents worked really hard to create a life for us that was very westernized so that we fit into this culture, but that meant erasing connection to culture and being very intentional about how they raised us so that we fit in and not necessarily belonged, which they're two different things.
Yeah, very. Mm-hmm. I haven't really thought about that before, but that is very true.
Yeah. So they raised us to fit in, and it kind of led to this disconnect with culture. So I think myself and a lot of other folks who are kind of in a similar space find themselves in the position to reconnect and like pick up those pieces that were kind of left behind and re-invite almost that relationship to culture. Because it's like, okay, I fit in to Western society, but I actually don't, feel like I belong to my roots anymore. And so now I want to go back and create that.
Yeah, you're just kind of a lost soul amongst
a little bit
Western society.
Yeah. Like I fit in. Like I understand what everyone's talking about when we're talking about sports, but I'm like, I don't understand like what people who look like me are going through or what they're talking about,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fairly common thing with a lot of settler families, like coming over. It's like you are making a move, especially in like that era that like they would have done it in. Yeah. Like I know like my mom immigrated from Denmark when she was 4 years old. Yeah. And it was like a 2-week long boat journey like to Canada. No idea, like no connection back. Yeah. Like you It's not like you can just like FaceTime your mom and be like, what's up? Yeah, things are good. So like you're really like throwing everything out the window. Then when you get to that land, like you want to almost like start fresh.
You want to make it worth it. Like you just, you just left everything behind. Like this better be worth it. We want to make a better life for our kids. We got to fit right in.
Yeah. Make a better life for our kids.
Make a better life.
Yeah.
Which is, kind of the essence of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that in the earliest recording, and it got really heavy really quick. Maybe we can rehash that at the end of it.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that, because that was a little deep for the beginning of a podcast. Yeah. So you did this sociology degree. You've got all these new words to describe it. When did you start skiing? Was that before or after your degree? Or
so I started actually skiing. I skied for like a couple of years when I was really little. So really little. I was like, I want to say like 8 or 9 when I started skiing. And my parents' mentality around the whole thing was like, we'll give you the skills to do this. Because again, I think it was another one of those things that like my dad had wished he had done growing up. Right. And so when we started skiing, he actually also learned how to ski, which was kind of cool.
Does he still ski?
No, he came out once with us last year, and it just like wasn't for him. But I think he was happy to have like gotten that experience that he had been wanting, I think, for a lot of his life. So yeah, when they put us into skiing, it was very much like, we'll give you the tools. And then if you're older and want to come back to this as an adult, you have the foundation to do it. And I was good at it and I really liked it, but it just wasn't one of those things that as a kid, like my parents could afford to upkeep. Like you're growing like a freaking weed as a child, and you're always outgrowing clothes, outgrowing skis. And then lift tickets are expensive, getting to the mountain every single weekend. Like we lived in like North Delta, Surrey area. So like the mountain was like an hour and a half away. So it just like wasn't feasible. We stuck to team sports. We stuck to hockey and softball, volleyball, all of those ones. But I came back to skiing in my early 20s because I started working for like an outdoor retailer, and those industry pro deals are the only reason that I was like able to get back into skiing, because it actually made it affordable. Like all of those pro deals with other ski brands. I was like, whoa, I've been wanting to do this. I went to UBC where there's like a huge ski and board culture. Right. And I always wanted to like take advantage of that student pass up to Whistler. I never actually did it in my undergrad. I never got to it, but I think in my like 4th year of university, I like got back into skiing because I could finally afford to. And I was like, this is awesome. Like I really love this. And it was like a tumultuous relationship, I would say, with skiing in the beginning, getting back into it. But I'm so grateful for like those deals that allowed me to get back into it.
That made it, even then, like it's affordable with an asterisk, because it's still expensive. Like skiing has always been a very privileged sport with expensive equipment, day tickets, and then like that kind of familial, like you need to have people who kind of know what they're doing, or like know that it takes, like it's not just something that you do on like a Friday afternoon. Like it takes commitment to get to the mountain, to get to those places. And like if you come from a family that doesn't have that kind of history of doing that, it's really difficult to break into. Yeah,
totally. Like I can't even really foresee any other way where it would have happened as a child, because like my family didn't have that intergenerational knowledge of knowing how great skiing is.
Yeah. Great term for it.
Yeah. It's just like, if your grandparents skied and they like had a ski chalet like up somewhere in like wherever in Colorado, and then they taught your parents how to ski, and your parents had been on ski since you were 2. Exactly. Yeah. And then you were on skis since you were 2 because it's something that your grandparents did, and you have all those retro photos of like your grandfather like skiing. Like that just feels like the epitome of like white culture to me.
Totally. I mean, you are hitting the nail on the head. Like I grew up skiing at 2 years old. My dad and like his brothers and sisters did it. My grandpa did it. Like I think he may have been the one who started it, but it's like, to me and like my like little circle of family, and like now that all my cousins and stuff are having kids, it's like on skis by 2. It's like that is like the rite to passage. Yeah. But it's, like growing up, you don't think anything different to it because you don't know any different. And then now as like an adult, you're able to look back and like, you meet people that are outside of your little bubble, and you expand your horizons, and it's like, holy shit, that was like such a privilege to even be able to get to do that. Yeah. And now like, I don't even know how families, even the wealthiest of families, can afford to do it now. Like when a day ticket at Whistler is like $250 or something like that.
Exactly.
There's no amount of skiing on the world that's like,
worth that.
Right.
No. And it's just like, and like you're saying, like, yeah, when you're a kid and like this is just how it's done. Like everybody starts at 2. That's also the bubble that you're being raised in. Like
Totally.
you're like meeting kids and going to ski school with kids who are also in this like same bubble of experience. And so to no fault to you, that's what normal is. Like
Right.
normal is skiing at that age, and you don't know anything different. And then what that kind of creates in turn is like, I feel like a lot of people who grow up in these like similar upbringings like end up making similar decisions down the line, and then you end up maintaining these like circles that are
Right.
all just like
Right.
homogenous, and we all keep existing in these like interesting homogenous spaces. Like I feel like always like with my suburb growing up, like if you didn't leave the suburb, like you stay in it. Like anybody who didn't really leave after high school just like stays in it, and they stay with like the same circle of people that we went to high school with, and that's okay. Like for some people that's awesome, and it's working out really well for them. They probably save a hell of a lot more money than I do, and I'm really jealous about
Yeah.
that. But like for me, I had to like go through that process of like breaking into these spaces,
Right.
this like uncomfortable, scary, like sometimes like hurtful process
I can imagine.
of breaking in.
Well, I mean, it's like in any kind of circle of life that people get into or are born into, I guess it's like it's really easy to just kind of stay in the track and not think differently. And like this kind of concept can be expanded out to like all sorts of big systemic things like racism, but down to like skiing, it's like if that's like the family kind of unit that you were raised in and that's just what you always know, it's way easier to just continue to go along with that rather than like take the time and have the difficult conversations with yourself to like ask other questions and go experience something else, go find something else. So
yeah, and it's just like
it's got to be terrifying coming from a position of as like somebody who has had to assimilate her whole life to like fit in with like what is quote unquote normal. Like that takes a lot of courage to like be able to be like, no, I want to do this thing that like people like me traditionally have never done.
Yeah, and it just like it feels like a lot of like fighting for your right to like exist somewhere. And even if it's like it doesn't feel like people are like taking that away from you. It's like it's just so often defending yourself and defending the way in which you move through life. Like I remember having to have this like really difficult conversation with somebody once where they had made a comment that was so just rooted in privilege, and it like really hurt me, and I didn't know why that one comment. It was so in passing, and I don't even think they'd remembered making it. But it had really hurt me. And I had brought it up with them a couple weeks later, and I was like, hey, when you said this to me, like, it didn't feel good. And like, it kind of feels like it's rooted in this like privilege that's to no fault of your own at all. But like, it's very much was rooted in like their own experiences and like very privileged experiences. And, you know, their parents had immigrated from Scotland, and you know their response to me was like, well, my grandfather like you know had to work really hard so that I can get all the experiences that like I got, and so that my parents could get all of the experiences that they had. And I was like, and I'm not saying that that's not true, and I was like, but like we also have to think about the fact that my grandparents also had to work really hard. Like my grandparents immigrated
to get you where you are. Yeah,
exactly. And like both of my grandmothers were widowed really shortly after immigrating with their husbands to Canada. My mom's mom was left to raise 6 daughters. My dad's mom was left to raise 4 sons and 1 daughter.
Wow.
And they didn't speak the language, and they worked in farms and factories.
Yeah.
They didn't have the tools to go and be able to like work in oil rigs or something like that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And that's even like going back to like your friend from Scotland whose grandpa had to work really hard. It's like, sure, but he was still working in like a majority of white people.
Exactly.
You know, society that was like colonizing, like actively colonizing these parts of the world. Like you had the upper hand. Like for your family, it was a completely different situation.
Exactly. Like yes, your grandfather worked really hard. They looked the part though. They looked and they sounded the part, and they didn't have these extra barriers that are out of their control that were stopping them. And that's what privilege is, right? Like nobody's saying that you didn't work hard. People are just saying that you didn't have to like, it wasn't because of the color of your skin or the language that you spoke.
Right.
That those weren't barriers to you.
Yeah. Would you want to share the comment that your friend made?
Yeah. They just, they had just called me like, because it had come up in a conversation of like, I hadn't gotten back into skiing yet. I was like really wanting to get back into skiing, and it came up that I didn't know how to like wake surf or something, and and they called me like the least Vancouver girl they had ever met.
Wake surfing's so Kelowna.
Yeah.
Let's be real about that.
Yeah. So it was just like this comment that was like, "Oh, you don't like ski super hard. Ooh, like you kind of hike, but like it was basically like you don't base your personality around the outdoors and like these like super privileged sports. You're the least Vancouver girl I've ever met." And I was like,
interesting.
And it came from somebody who was from Alberta. Like I was just like, wait, what are you saying to me?
That's interesting. Because we were talking the other night too. Like that quote there definitely feels a little bit more. That's just like a mean thing to say.
Yeah, it's just like a microaggression for sure, where you're just like,
yeah. Well, you were mentioning one the other night that like you had a friend who, when you were skiing, like a white friend was like, "Wow, you're actually pretty good at this."
It's the same person.
Oh, really? Yeah. Wow. Buddy over here's got some work to do.
Yeah, friend is a loose term.
An acquaintance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think that there's a lot of I guess they're probably not the best example to use here, but I think just within a lot of white culture, within these sports that have been so normalized by white culture, when you see somebody out there doing things who doesn't look like the norm, you have a lot of those prejudice. Like they're harmless. Like I don't think like nobody's like really like, you know, it's not like they're going to be going out and doing something really negative with that or using that to like really alienate somebody, but it's just like this like thing that you don't even think about. It's this subconscious like, oh wow, they're actually pretty good. Yeah. As if like I never expected to see a brown person who'd be decent at skiing.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've never seen it before.
It was just like this like total unconscious bias of like, you know, like they'd already, because of how I look, because of who I am, they'd made up this idea of how I can ski. It's a super human, it's very human to look at somebody and be like, I feel like I can like look at you based off what you're wearing and give you like a full story.
Oh, totally.
And it's fully rooted in unconscious biases and like stereotypes. And, you know, like people just don't realize like how those like comments like one at a time really like chip away at you. And it's just like this weird, like with that person in particular, it always just kind of felt like a weird like superiority thing where it was like, you're kind of a part of this space, but like you're still an outsider. Yeah. You know, and it always just made me feel that way. Line. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Never felt totally like embraced in the space. And I'm sure they've done a lot of, I'd hope that they would have done a lot of learning since they've said these things. But yeah, it's tough sometimes.
So then using that knowledge that you got from like your sociology degree, and then getting into skiing, kind of getting into the outdoor industry, which is something that like everybody deserves to have the right to access to. Like it's, like tell me like what kind of work do you do now that you've like built these skills? Because you do a lot of public speaking, you do a lot of like activism stuff, like I think like a lot of my work is centered around like advocacy and representation, because I'm a super firm believer in the fact that if you don't see yourself represented somewhere, there's no way that you're gonna feel comfortable to like exist authentically in these spaces. And for me, a lot of that experience was boiled down to my relationship with skiing, where I always felt like I was holding so many identities and it was stopping me from showing up confidently, and it was stopping me from just wanting to like rock up and be able to ski. Like when I first got back into skiing, and even now sometimes less now, I would say like when I first got back into it up until like last year, I'd always get to the ski hill and feel like I was representing Indian people, and I was representing women, and I was representing Indian women instead of just being able to be you,
instead of just being Indra. And it just kind of felt like I had to be good and I had to go really hard, because if somebody saw me, I was existing. And this is just how I felt, but it just felt like I was like representing an entire community that people don't see as often on this ski hill. There's definitely other South Asians on the ski hill, but like relative to white folks, it is so few and far between.
Totally.
And so whenever I see other South Asian people on the hill, like we always smile at each other. It's like we're speaking like a language. Like it's like, fuck yeah.
What's up?
Yeah. Nice to see you here too.
Yeah.
And it's the dopest thing. Like I really love when I see like other like Indian folks with like their children.
Yeah.
And I like that I get to see their children and like smile and wave at their children, because I just like hope that their child might remember me and like feel like that slightest bit more like they deserve to be there when they start to formulate maybe those same thoughts that I had growing up. So I do a lot of work around creating opportunities and spaces for other BIPOC women and gender expansive folks. And I do a lot of it around backcountry, like avalanche safety course trainings and that kind of stuff. Because for me, like, especially within those safety training courses, we fail to talk about the fact that psychological safety is so important. Like, you have to feel psychologically sound to be able to make physically safe decisions and to feel as though like your voice matters. And so, you know,
within the group, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like within the group, showing up that day, skiing with anybody, like you want to make sure that like you feel psychologically safe so that you can go. I feel like that's like a baseline for me. And so it's so amazing to like have these spaces that are just folks of color, because you don't have to defend your reason for being there. Like you all just have this like common understanding of like what got you to this moment and this just like unspoken gratitude that you get to be there. And then you can like bring up a hard topic that you would never bring up with your white friends, and everyone on the chair is like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. That's really funny. Just talk shit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. White people and the peanut butter jelly sandwiches, am I right?
It's absolutely an outlet.
Yeah. I mean, like, I can just like having grown up and being like even a white person in situations where I like go into the backcountry, go in with like a group that's like maybe more advanced than me and feeling like inadequate, that like not psychologically safe. And that's just on like the skills level factor. And like even today, you know, like I will ride every once in a while with like people who are like fairly like green at it and not have like the experience that I do. And I sense that from them. And I always like try to like, you know, it's okay. Like nothing's fucked here. We're going to like work this and get this together. But that's just on the skills level side. Like I can't imagine having that, like the other layers of like feeling like you need to be representing Indian people or Indian women or women in general. Like I think women in general in the outdoors is a huge thing that has like really expanded over the past, I want to say decade, but I mean, maybe even really in the last like 4 or 5 years, which is amazing. But like, there's still that huge gap between everybody else in the world.
Fully.
Yeah.
It's really tough. And it all kind of, you know, it all kind of came to be with inclusivity, because I was really
Tell me about inclusivity.
So
that was a question I was going to get there, but
perfect nice segue.
Transition.
Yeah, there we go. See, we're good at this.
Yeah.
Round 2. So that's kind of the space in which a lot of these trainings run, and it kind of just came together really serendipitously, because I want to say like October or November of 2020 had applied for a mentorship program for backcountry skiing, and I didn't have my avalanche safety course training yet, and I really wanted it, but it was so expensive, but I knew I was going to get to it. Like I was like, I know in January I'm going to get it. I just need to save my pennies so that I can like afford it. So I applied for the course, and I didn't get into the course because I didn't have the training yet, and I was like, man, like this is there are some barriers, like this avalanche safety training course to getting into this program, that are disproportionately affecting marginalized folks. One of those barriers being like the psychological safety from an avalanche safety training course. Like not only did I not really have the money to do it, but I was also like so scared of taking this course with like 5 white dudes and 2 white women, you know, like I was just like anticipating what the space would feel like, and had so much stress about even like applying or like registering for a course. And so I had texted the president of this mentorship program and asked if she knew of any like scholarships that helped BIPOC folks get these kinds of certifications or trainings. And she was like, no, I actually don't know of anything like that.
And this is 2020?
And this is 2020.
Yeah.
So post-murder of George Floyd, like everyone is making big promises in every single industry. And I was like,
yeah, everybody's trying to tick those boxes.
Exactly. And I was like, okay, no training like that exists. Like, I guess I'm just going to create this program on my own.
Yeah.
And so I told my idea to one of my friends who is super well connected in the sea to sky. And she is just like the master connector of all people. And she was like, I love this idea, and I think that you need to do it. And I can get on a call with Burton today and pitch your idea to them. And within like 12 hours, it went from like an idea that I had like before my morning coffee at 7 a.m. to like something that was like fully being mobilized, was we were going to get
Amazing.
7 people certified.
And have you had quite a bit of support from brands and stuff trying to like support those movements?
So Burton was amazing for our first one. And then I've actually been super successful in working with Arc'teryx for the rest of, for this year, this past season. We've done 5 programs.
Yeah.
And Arc'teryx has been really phenomenal at helping support it, covering costs.
Yeah.
And then we also work with Evo, who does all of our gear rentals with us.
We talked about this
They're
last
the
night.
best.
Evo, yeah. Great folks there.
They're on it.
Yeah.
And so it's really awesome.
And especially in this department too.
Yes.
The diversity, equity, inclusion part, like
they're so dialed.
yeah.
And I appreciate what I appreciate from Evo a lot of the time is like, it's kind of like a no questions asked. We trust that you are like the subject matter expert in this. We trust that you're going to make the best decisions. Like, we're white people on the other end of this. You go and do it.
Mhm.
What's best for your community, Indra?
Right.
Like, we're here for you. And so that's been really cool. And so it's been like this year. So yeah, it kind of started with an avalanche safety training course last year and has grown into, we've offered 2 avalanche safety training courses this year. We've done an intro to backcountry. We've done a backcountry booster course. And then we took a bunch of women up to the Keys and Clares hut for International Women's Day.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Did you camp up there?
Yeah, we stayed in the hut for a night.
So sick.
It was so great.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to hear that there are brands that are like empowering you to be doing that too. Because I know, especially after like the whole BLM like protests and everything, like people were frantically trying to tick boxes and changing the imagery on their websites and like just trying to like portray this like, you know, diverse, inclusive usage of whatever brand or product it may be. But like how much of that is actually being integrated from like a corporate perspective, or like how much are they actually doing besides just like kind of ticking the greenwashing boxes, you know?
Exactly. Like, we're almost 2 years out of the murder of George Floyd, and who's actually like stuck around and made change. And what I think we'll find is like the people who have been making like the slower, quieter change over the last 2 years are the ones who are actually committed to it. Like, there were a bunch of companies who like hopped on, posted the black tile, like
yeah, exactly.
and then like to never be heard of again, you know? And it's just kind of like everything that moves through social media these days. It kind of feels like everybody is like momentarily like,
it hops on the trend until something bigger comes up, and then they're like, oh my God, Ukraine. Got
to move to the next one.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can carry all of these, like, we don't have to like move from one passion bin to the next, you know, like we can, it's exhausting for sure, but we can like spread our passion amongst different places as well.
Well, and I think this is a really, this is a concept, like I loosely talked about it with Maya during the first podcast. And like, it's really funny just having listened to that again. Like, I was just like, had no idea what I'm doing and trying to form complex thoughts about things and just rambling. But we were talking about, and now I just like, now the thought just escaped me.
No, come back.
Oh God. Oh God. Oh yeah. That's it. It came back again. Thank God. That would have been really embarrassing. So, like, I think this is like really epitomized in a lot of Western culture, but especially in like the brand kind of business sense, is where a lot of the decisions that we make as individuals, and then on, you know, in the corporate ladders and these organizations that are all kind of running and have place within our societies, it's very reactionary, where we're like, oh shit, something happened, like we need to hop on this so that we can appear to be best. Oh, something else happened, like pivot, and like, oh, address this. Oh, make a social media post. Do we have that ready to go? Quick, get it out. Oh, post the black tile. Like, it's just, everybody's like frantically trying to keep up with the social norms instead of like, like taking time to like breathe and assess the situation. This is what Maya was saying, is just that like the Squamish way of life is like thinking before you speak, and thinking concisely and slowly. And there's just so much of that like indigenous wisdom, if you want to call it that, but just like that way of being that is lost in this fast-paced society that we live in, where everybody's trying to chase like the next trending thing to get like the dollar, or to seem like that they're, you know, socially like on top of things, and that they're kind of keeping up with the trends. And it's a shame, because if we as a society took the time to like slow down and think and really like examine the systems in which we live and like work to implement that change, like, yeah, it would be like a much slower progressive change like you're talking about, like people working for that over the past 2 years. But like that is what's going to lead to the truly constructive and like radical change that we need.
Yeah, exactly. Like being thoughtful and intentional instead of this, like, I feel like instant gratification, like just plagues our Western society in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same way in which you're talking about, like that instant, like we have to be on it right now so that we can gratify our consumers. Like I need to make this post about Ukraine so that people know where we stand.
Right.
Even though there's like no action tied to it. Like it's just empty words. And I have this conversation with the company that I work for right now where it's like, okay, really awesome that, you know, we've talked about land acknowledgements with the company. Because I think they're really important. And I think that like I have them in my email signature.
Sure.
Like I do them when I get into a meeting. However, on a company scale, I said, if we want to be doing land acknowledgements before every meeting and we want a plaque in all of our stores with whose land we're on, what are we doing to give back to that community? Like before we start telling the world that who's like the land that we're on, are we defending like land defenders? Are we willing to give land back?
Right.
Like what's our stance here? Because if we're just saying like, I know that I'm on this stolen land and that's all that I'm going to do about it, I'm just going to say it. Like it's so performative. The words are empty.
Right.
They hold no meaning.
Exactly.
And so
it's the low hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing to do. It's like
it's the box.
You copy and paste it. Like a lot of people probably don't even know how to spell out like Squamish in like phonetic language, you know?
Totally. Yeah. And it's all baby steps, and like, and I appreciate that like desire as a larger company to be like, we want to talk about the land we're on, and it's like, but you don't want to talk about it. Like you just want to say whose land you're on, and then like move forward as if, you know, like it again. It's just like the box, and like I've been challenging them, and we're taking our time with it because I want to have that conversation of like, what are we doing with the communities that we're saying we're on their land?
Yeah. How
are we actually giving back to them? Like, what are we doing to support them? What are we doing to support land back for them? Because if we're not, then unfortunately, I don't think that we can.
Shouldn't be saying it.
Exactly, which sucks.
It does, yeah. But I think like the kind of way that you're going about it is like taking that slow, calculated approach and like having these conversations with people, because so much of it is just like general white person discomfort, right? Like they don't want to have these conversations because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, like I don't know what to say. Oh, land back, you're going to take my home? It's like, no. It's like it's about respecting and honoring the land that you're on, like whose land that belongs to. And like, yeah, helping support those communities, give them voice, give them power, like standing for their sovereignty when there's issues, when there's like pipelines coming through.
Yeah.
You're like, you'll post a black square, but you won't say anything about like the Wet'suwet'en situation when like RCMP are like mobilizing on like land defense. It's like, it's insane.
Yeah.
And people are just like, oh, that's too political. I don't want to talk about that.
And it's like, but you posted a black square, which like in effect is all about ACAB. Like,
exactly.
So like, why is that not extending to all issues?
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like, doing the land acknowledgements, and when I say funny, I'm not like haha great joke. It's like dark comedy kind of funny. It's when they you know, we'll post like a land acknowledgement somewhere and like just say that, but then it's like, okay, we did that, check that box, now we're going to go on with business as usual, and now hopefully we've like opened our product market up to a slightly more woke audience instead of actually doing the work that it takes to like build and work for that progressive change.
Yeah. Nail on the head.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Dark comedy.
It's a weird world.
Have you had any experiences as a brown person, like being like people trying to like use your image or something for those kind of brown washing? Can we call it, because it's not greenwashing, is it brown wash?
Yeah, is it I mean, I think it's just
coining
like
a new term right now?
Brown washing. You know what? It's really interesting because I also like, I just do like a bunch of freelance modeling gigs.
Right.
It often works out really nicely because I have a lot of friends who are photographers and they need talent, and I get casted for those things.
Yeah, you guys have your whole little crew.
Yeah, there's something going on. And it's great. Like I get to work with my best friend and we are all super comfortable together and we put out really great product. But it's such a fine balance, I find, because my modeling career really took off after June 2020 because people realized that advertisements need to be more representative and they need to look different. And it's kind of like two things can be true. Like it can be really true that like we do need to diversify media, and I'm really grateful that there are now little Indian girls who like go onto the MEC website and they like see me on a banner hiking a mountain, because I never got that imagery as a kid, and so I never really realized that I could do that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. You never saw it as being something that was feasible for you.
Yeah, like there was nobody who looked like me telling me I could do it.
Right.
So you just don't really, your mind doesn't really go there. Your imagination can't even picture it.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for the opportunities. And that's kind of why I do model. Like it really started for me being like, I want to show other girls who look like me or kids that look like me that they're allowed to do these things and be in these spaces. And if it's like more like fashion-based modeling, I want to show them that they're beautiful, because literally all of westernized like media is not telling them that they are.
I know.
And so it's like, if you can see me on an ad for something and like that, like I just, it's more so for like the younger kids than anything else. And then in the same breath, like, you know, we've talked about this and I don't know where the balance is, because like I've been on a set where it's like all the talent are people of color,
right?
But everybody on set and everybody who like casted us is white.
Mm-hmm.
So like the casting director is white, the producer, all the photographers, all the videographers, everybody else is white. And so it's like, then it kind of feels like we were just chosen because we're folks of color, and they were like, we just need to be diverse. And then they just like grabbed all the colored folks they could find in the sea to sky that are models, and we're like, you guys. We're like,
yeah,
okay. And so it's like, it's a super interesting balance where like me and my friends were talking about this. We're like, shoot, like it's great that we all get to like be here and be on set together. And we're like, it's dope. It's dope that this one brand wants to show like all of these people of color. But then sometimes it can feel like icky being on the receiving end of it, where it's like, then it kind of just feels like you only casted me because of this. And like, I've even been told by so many people, like with no malice attached to it, but them being like, yeah, no, you would do great at modeling right now. Like, this is your time right now. And it's like, oh, right now. Right now.
Yeah.
You know, like
get it while it's hot. It's trending. Hop on the bandwagon.
You're trending right now.
Yeah.
People want you. So just do it like while you can is how it always feels. And I'm like,
Well, I mean, and there's always kind of been that, like, at least in my generation growing up, and I'm going to age myself here really quick. Did you have Captain Planet growing up?
No.
Oh my God. Wow. So yeah, Captain Planet. Oh, now I have to describe the whole premise of Captain Planet, which is just even more ridiculous. It's like these 5 kids who have rings, and each ring is like a power of like an element, like earth, wind, water, fire, and heart.
Sick. Oh.
Right. Yeah. And like this is just like a very common thing in like all these old cartoons that we grew up with, where it's like you have this group of kids, and there's like a white redheaded kid, there's a black kid, there's a brown, or no, there was a, I'm trying to think of the cast of Captain Planet now. There was a little Asian girl, there was a white blonde girl, and then there was like a brown Indian boy.
That's sick.
So yeah, it's like that, but again, it's all like face value, because it's like that was in the 90s when that was coming out. So it's like cool. Like my whole generation, again, aging myself, we grew up on that, but like look at all the problems that are still persistent within that. Like you're about a decade younger than me. So like you guys are like, your generation is like really like kind of diving into the work that has, I think, like the seeds were planted in our generation.
Totally.
And again, it goes back to like, where do you see yourself or see people who look like you doing those careers? And in the film industry, especially outdoor sports and just outdoor industry in general, you know, like I do a lot of film work, and like I'm a white guy, and I got into it through skiing somehow. And I feel like it's one of those things that's changing, but it's a much more specialized industry that's going to take more time to get that next generation of youth into it to see it, you know?
Yeah. And like, I mean, like if we think about like ski films, of course they're going to be predominantly white when we're looking at those like super shreddy ski movies, those ski cuts, like, because again, it comes back to like who's had access to it for a long time.
Exactly. So
it is going to take a while for it to like become equitable. And it's like, maybe in the interim, we figure out like new narratives that also include BIPOC, so that we can like not focus on this like super sendy edit all the time, because for a while that's still going to grab one type of person.
Right.
Why don't we shift the narrative of what we're looking for so that it's more inclusive of experiences that everybody has, which I think has been more prevalent in ski movies as of late. Like the VIMF has like a full Color the Trails network of movies, which is the sickest thing.
It is, yeah.
So that's a really great direction that it's going in.
It is, and it's funny when you talk about that, like, because even the that mentality of like the classic kind of like shred flick led by white males, like going out exploring. The idea of exploring is so colonial. Oh my God, I know. It's like, oh, we went in and explored this mountain that nobody's ever been to. It's like, whose fucking land is that on, bud? And then going out there like, oh, we dominated that mountain. We like climbed it. The conditions were perfect, and we ripped it. It's like there's so much like just
the conquering mentality.
Right. It's very kind of like goes back to like 16th century like New World explorers, like discovering these new lands. It's like, you didn't discover shit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Yeah. And it's funny because that has for so long been the narrative of all these outdoor sports movies.
Yeah.
And so for that to change is great, but like, yeah, it'll take a while for like the next generation of youth who are like, you know, kids now to get to that point when they're like the stars of it. But there is still so much more work to be done in sharing that information and that like kind of breaking down and dissecting that narrative and showing, like, if anything, just like showing the toxicity of it to the current like younger generation, so that when they grow up they are like well aware of how it works, how we got into this crazy situation.
Yes.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny. Captain Planet. It's funny, Captain Planet. So I guess I didn't fully finish explaining Captain Planet.
I'm just picturing Power Rangers, and I know that it's not
kind of.
But
Well, so they all have their rings, and the rings can control the elements or like different things. But with their powers combined, they like put their rings together, and this beam of light comes out. It creates Captain Planet, and Captain Planet is this like, you know, classic superhero type dude in like a blue and white Earth like outfit. And he's, you know, he comes in, he defeats bad guys, he stops pollution. You know, he's like taking out oil rigs and stuff. It's great.
Sounds like we need him.
Yeah, I know. I miss Captain Planet. It was like Avatar before Avatar, kind of mixed with like, I guess Power Rangers. It was great.
There's a lot happening.
Did you ever see Fern Gully? Fern Gully is another classic. Man.
But like maybe it's an American-Canadian thing.
Maybe.
Or we're a decade apart in age.
I think that's just good content. I think everybody's like, you know, throwing it back to like 60s and 70s vibes right now, like all the boho stuff.
Yeah.
Like, man, bring back the 80s environmental cartoons. Like those things were fire. In fact, I think one of the arch nemesises of Planet, or Captain Planet, I can't remember his name. He was like some ginger guy with a mohawk. It was like loosely based on Donald Trump. It was supposed to be, there were supposed to be multiple different characters, and one was going to be like a rich billionaire, Donald Trump. And then they ended up merging them both into one character, but that's where the orange hair comes from.
Oh my goodness.
Little fun fact for a show that you've never even heard about prior to this conversation.
I'm going to go look it up when I go home.
You will love it. I'm sure it's all on YouTube. This is just a question that I have written down here that I'm going to just throw at you.
Okay.
Blind. Do you consider recreation an extractive resource?
Definitely. Yeah, I do. You know, and I think especially in the context in which a lot of us are engaging with recreation, and myself included, I can be so much better. Like, I think that the relationship that folks have with sport is very one-sided. Like it feels oftentimes very much like what you can get out of from the land. Kind of like what we're talking about with like that whole like conquering narrative, like having this list of objectives and wanting to like conquer each of them, wanting to explore this like untouched quote unquote territory,
the wild, quote unquote,
the wild. Like everything is wild.
Yeah,
everything in this world is wild, and like you've said, everything is nature. Like this narrative around like wanting to be the first, or like wanting to shred super hard. It just kind of feels like it's a very like, I am taking from the land. And I think where we lack that like reciprocity is we don't really often have conversations about what we can be doing to give back to the land. Like what small actions we can be doing to give back to Indigenous communities who have occupied this land since like time out of mind. Or how we can make efforts to be less like extractive, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because both you and I, despite our differences in looks and backgrounds and upbringings, like we're both settlers on this land. And at the end of the day, like it was never our land. And no matter what we try to do to strive to be naturalized to these environments, like, you know, you've spent a lot of time with Maya in the outdoors. Have you been out with her and Sandy? Like,
I haven't been out with Sandy. No.
Man, so I did a shoot with them for a Patagonia thing last winter. And we went out here in the mountains in Squamish and lwətaʔ Nation and stuff. Like we went out to Duffy and stuff. And Sandy's lwətaʔ, Maya's Squamish. And it was so powerful to hear them talk about their stories and like ancestral stories, for like Sandy to be like, oh, like my grandpa like helped build this cabin and like came up here and there's these stories about like you know, like avalanches and like knowing which way the snow is blowing off Mount Curry, how the avalanche conditions are going to be. And it's like, fucking A, man, like Western science cannot, like, no matter how many numbers and digits we put to it, like we've still only been here for 100 years and people get so tied in this kind of culture to like, oh, well, this is like what we've always done in the family. Like my family's a logging family. We've been doing this. It's like, calm down, dude. Your grandpa logged, and before that he was an immigrant because there were no other opportunities. Your grandpa was an entrepreneur. He was an adapter. Like things are changing. You should adapt too.
Exactly.
It's like we will never have that like long-standing ancestral cultural connection to these lands that these nations have.
Never. And like, the way in which Maya like tells the stories of this land, like the stories around like Garibaldi, it's just like so it's so humbling to just be like, these spaces have been occupied since time out of mind. People have fled to them during floods. Like there are so many eons of stories. And when thinking about like, Western science, Maya and I have had this conversation around like avalanche safety training courses and how it's all based on Western snow science. Why aren't we having conversations about how to integrate like Indigenous science perspectives? Because they've been here again since time out of mind. They've been navigating these lands. They've been able to dodge avalanches, dodge catastrophe, not based on digging a pit, not based on taking a microscope to the snow. They have other ways of doing it. So where can we start to take their knowledge with their permission and integrate it into what we're learning? Because again, it's just like small ways that we can breathe life back into their culture, back into their ways of being as like a community. We can all take part.
Sure. Yeah. And I like to put like just verbiage wise, because I think like words can do a lot for how like sentence structure forms the thought in your mind, but it's not about us with their permission, taking their knowledge and integrating it into ours. It's like, our systems need to integrate within theirs.
Yes.
Like the other way around, like
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like following their, like Maya calls it, like their protocol.
Right.
And like watching, adapting our systems.
I just chatted with Maya the other day and now I'm like, oh yeah, there are all these other amazing things that we should talk about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have her on shortly again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that recreation is an extractive?
I do.
Resource?
I think it can be.
Yeah.
I think it in the world we live in today, it's become so commonplace to like, for likes and follows to get out and get the photo, ski tips looking down some sick coulee. It's like fucking rad, dude. Get after it. But at the same time, like as part of that, are you promoting something that is like going out and just getting people to like, use these lands like high octane, get as much out of them as you can before you go back to your desk job 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And I think there's this real disconnect with that, where like people are always trying to get like the gnarliest, sickest, coolest, raddest thing, or maybe not even that. Like for the casual person, just like going up to like Whistler on the weekend because it's like what they do. But like you go up there exclusively to like recreate, and that's where you recreate, and then you leave it and you go back to your normal life. I think, and this is also like a thing that's definitely rooted in privilege, because all of society is like there's so much diversity in like what is even achievable for certain people. But I think in order for recreation to not be extractive like that, you really have to form like a bond with it that goes beyond just like the Saturday Sunday grind. Like it has to be something that like you integrate into your life, and like it becomes like ritual or place. Like there's like spirit to it, where you like acknowledge the land and acknowledge like your role within it, and you're like, going out there picking up trash. You're like sometimes I think like the biggest thing you can do to like truly recreate is just like walk a mountain bike trail and pick up things or look around, because like mountain biking especially, like you're going so fast, you're not looking around. You're just like,
No.
you're on the dirt and you're like,
And your eye is like 10 feet ahead of you. You're like,
Totally.
you're never like in
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
and it's like, it's fun as hell. Like, it's great.
So
like, yeah, hacking some brown powders. it's a time, but like, there's another element to it where it's like, if you miss everything that you're going by, you're never going to actually form that care for it. And I think like with Nerdy About Nature stuff, that's where I've been like trying to like educate people. I'm like, that's a hemlock tree. This is a spruce tree. So people can like start to see that and make those connections to the lands that they're on, because otherwise we're just like going to be taking it for granted. And then it doesn't matter what the quality or the health of a forest ecosystem is. As long as there's a bike trail, it checks the box,
Yeah.
And we need to start thinking on like broader scales to like how these ecosystems function beyond our immediate needs of recreation. It's like, do they serve cultural purposes, ecological purposes? Like what's the value here?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what like we're both getting at too is just like the current mindset and like that kind of, the mindset around the outdoors in the communities in which we live is really extractive. Like the relationship that a lot of people have, again, super one-sided, but it's susceptible to change, like for sure.
It is. And I think like we talked a little bit about this the other night too. The concept of like giving back to these communities and giving back to these lands. Like, I love where that mentality is at and the direction that's going. But again, going to verbiage, I think there's an element of like, of shifting that somehow that I don't exactly know how, but the idea of giving back to me reads as very transactional. It's like, you get something out of it. Oh, cool. Here's like $5 for parking to the local community, or like, it's like very much like one side. It's like, you give me this and I'll give you this back.
Totally.
But we need to change from this like transactional 1-versus-1 or 1-to-1 system to kind of one that is more encompassing of everything. So it's like, it just like, we don't, like to get to a point when we don't need to have to give back because the way that we're doing things
it's reciprocal in nature. Like it's just, it's clean.
It's encompassing of all the sustainable elements of it, like beyond just like an environmental sustainability, but like an economic and ecological, cultural, societal, psychological, physiological. There's like all these different realms within the definition of sustainable that we just aren't considering.
Totally. That's definitely something to think on too.
Yeah.
It's like, that one's going to occupy space in my brain for a while.
I know. And I'm still trying to like even come up with like the right words to like,
No, but I know where you're getting at. Yeah. Yeah. The right language around it.
Because giving back is great. Sure. But like, we need to create a system where giving back isn't necessary because it just is good all around.
Exactly. It's not like I'm giving back because I've done something
that
is extractive. So I must pay you.
Exactly. It's like oil companies paying for education. Yeah. It's like, okay.
Yeah, totally.
You're like, thank you, I guess, but you're also destroying the world we live in. So how good is education going to be?
So how can we do it in a way that's just ultimately good?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if there's an answer to that.
Oh, man. We can sit on that for a bit.
Yeah.
That kind of goes back to those heavy conversations we had at the beginning of the first conversation.
Maybe it's better those ones got left out. I don't know.
Would you want to rehash it?
We could.
I don't even remember what we were talking about.
I don't either.
Well, we were talking about the heaviness of the world and how...
Sometimes one thing that we were talking about was sometimes how it feels like, you as an individual are doing things that you believe to be like right and good, and it like fuels your fire and it fuels your right, your reason for being. And then sometimes they're like, you're doing all of that and there's still these like huge powers above you that almost feel like a giant foot coming over you and just like squashing you. Like
what kind of power do I actually hold as an individual to make the change I hope to see?
Yeah. And it's tough because it's just like, it's really hard because, sometimes I feel things very deeply all the time. Like for me, like feelings are very big, and I'll get into spaces of just like, for what am I doing this? Like I work my 9-to-5 job and then I just like fill all my other time with like this line of work, this passion of mine. And I'm like, and then like, for what? Like, why am I doing this? And those feelings can feel really big sometimes when it just kind of feels like you're trying so hard, but the world around you isn't changing.
Right.
And you're like, oh, like, why am I still having these conversations that I was having like 3 years ago? Like, why haven't we at least moved the needle a little bit? But then you'll receive that like one email from that one person who is like, who you had an impact on that you would have never known you had an impact on. And then it's like big exhale and like reground. That's why, you know, I do it.
Brings you back to the juice.
Yeah.
Well, I think like seeing you here and being able to talk to you, like, I think it's important to remember that, like, yeah, it can feel daunting and like really difficult to like make any progress here, but you even being here is the change happening, right? Like 20, 30 years ago, I don't know if there would have been an Indian girl growing up skiing and creating a like community for inclusivity and diversity, and like there's no way that that would have happened back then at the scale it is now. So it's like just you existing here is the change. Right? And there's so much of that like unseen change that you're like then rippling down to like other people, like, because for every one person who emails you and says that, there's probably 10 other people who just don't get around to emailing. Yeah,
it's pretty sweet. Like, you're totally right. Like, it's always worth it for like that one random girl who comes up to you in a bar and is like, I know you. And you're like, ah.
I know you from Instagram.
Yeah. Like I did with you.
Right.
But it's just like, you're totally right. Like the fact that I can exist confidently in this space and that I'm surrounded by a lot of people who are doing the same work. Like Maya is in the same line of work. Juju with Color the Trails. Juju like literally walked so that I could run. I often feel like I was passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion in outdoor spaces, and Juju was like doing the work before I was. And so the fact, and like my friend like Anahid, and they run an organization called Belay All, or Take Over Skateboarding based in the city. Like the fact that all of us exist and know each other and are supported by like larger communities is, like you're saying, like a really great example of the fact that like the needle's moving. And sometimes it feels slow. Sometimes it feels frustrating. Sometimes there are still people who say like really harmful shit online, and that can be really discouraging.
Yeah.
But
people are horrible online.
They're really mean sometimes. But the fact, I'm really grateful that we also all have each other to like soundboard with and work with and like share these grievances with, because you know, if I'm going through something, I can go to Maya and be like, how did you manage this? And she can provide me with that insight and that knowledge. And so I have a lot of gratitude for other folks who are also in this line of work who've just like shared their knowledge, and we all create these spaces together, and like we just can accomplish so much more together.
Totally.
Yeah.
All together. Is there anything else you'd like to add or talk about while we got the time?
I don't think so.
Where can people go to find out more, support inclusivity?
Yeah. So inclusivity right now just exists on Instagram. So you can find it at inclusivity. And then I'm at Indra. It's INDRUH. Indra. It's always funny. People think that that's how my name is spelled. And then my email address is how my name is actually spelled. But they'll like start the email with hi Indra with a UH. And I'm like,
You just spelled it out.
Yeah.
You should just get both emails to just answer.
I should,
from both.
yeah. Or just like indra@gmail.com. I wonder if that's been taken.
That'd be a good one to
I
have.
To check, yeah.
Before we go, I'm going to bring it back full circle. Tell me about the American dream.
Oh, the American dream is a concept of assimilation that everybody feels as though that they want to fit in, but it's a box that is only actually meant to comfortably hold one type of person, and that is a fucking nuclear white family.
Boom. Yeah. Could not agree with you more on that.
Like that's truly it, right? Like I feel like so many people like immigrate here and like, or back in the day would immigrate and they would want to have like the American dream. You'd see it on TV all the time, and that's what you want. So you give up everything to achieve this American dream. And throughout that process of surrendering, you surrender everything that made you who you were and everything that made you like unique to fit into this box that actually doesn't want to hold you. Yeah.
And that actually isn't like enjoyable. Like,
no,
people generally aren't happy in those situations. Like you end up like settling, like quarter life, midlife crisis. Like I think American, and when I say American, like Turtle Island, Canada included, and probably parts of Europe are the only places where like midlife crisis really happen.
Totally.
Because it's like you've had to sacrifice so much of who you are to fit into these boxes that society dictates you should fit into, and then you are like halfway through your life and you're like, holy fuck, I'm not happy.
Exactly. Because you were just sold this like consumeristic, capitalistic idea that everybody has told you is the dream. And so you make all of your choices and all of these sacrifices to get there. And like I said, you just like lose yourself along the way, which is why these crises happen.
Right.
You've like totally lost yourself to this concept that probably wasn't super achievable to begin with.
Yeah, and it's tough because the systems that we live in are so set up to like further that narrative and keep you kind of along that path, you know, keep your credit score high, get your house, get your car, your white picket fence, that it's really difficult to like create anything that differs from the norm.
Yeah, and it feels uncomfortable and it feels wrong.
Right.
You know, to like make those decisions that differ. Because again, if we want to come back to like representation, there's so much representation of like in like TV, in like ads of what that looks like. And up until now, I mean, like up until more recently, but like back in the day, I feel like that was the only representation that you got of like what life in America was like. And so that's all people are seeing and that's all they're living towards. And there wasn't anything like showing you a story of something different in a good way, in like an achievable, aspirational narrative.
Right.
And so much of it, so many things in life come back to like what you're told, what is like represented to you, and then that's what you go and aspire to be. And I think it becomes really hard for, you know, like racialized families who immigrate wanting that.
Yeah.
And there's so many great books, nonfiction and fiction, about it. I read a really amazing fiction book called All My Rage, and it centers 2 Pakistani kids whose families immigrated to California, and I just think everybody should read it. I'd be so curious. Yeah.
All My Rage.
All My Rage.
Add it to your book list.
Add it to your book list. I'd love to know what a white person thinks about it.
Yeah.
Because I ate it up in like 4 days. My mom ate it up in 2 days. My aunt just ordered it. And I think for us, it resonated super deeply. And it felt like I couldn't put it down. I cried so much. My mom cried a lot reading it.
Yeah, I haven't had a good book that makes you cry in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it got me. So
yeah, and it's funny though, because like even as, again, funny in the dark comedy sense, even as we as a society seemingly progress towards like a more diverse and inclusive future, even in like the TV ads and stuff, it's still just like, you know, it's like maybe a mixed race family now instead of the kind of classic white nuclear family, but they're still in that suburban white picket fence house.
Yeah.
Or they're in like some swanky apartment. Like it's still kind of feeding into that like consumerist model that keeps people like feeling like they need to, you know, work a 9-to-5 job and achieve a lot and have a high paying salary to afford the things that makes you quote unquote happy in life. But
totally.
Yeah.
Where's the storyline of like the Indian family who rents their house and doesn't own it? I want that story.
Right.
Lord knows I'll never be able to own property.
So. Oh my God. Certainly not in this part of the world.
Yeah.
No way.
In this economy?
In this economy? You kidding me? Just because I forgot to ask you about it, tell me, what does it mean to racialize the outdoors?
Racialize the outdoors. I mean, kind of feels like, you know, face value there. Like it just means to create a space where like it is so much more encompassing of who actually lives in these spaces. You know, like you like walk onto a trail and it looks like how the city looks. Maybe not Vancouver because it's also not the most diverse, but it looks more how like Toronto looks in nature.
Yeah.
But like just like creating spaces where like everybody can show up and you're not immediately thinking like that is a group of like Indian tourists. Like
right.
that fact that they are Indian, they are other doesn't cross your mind. They're just people. They are just there to hike. They are just there to ski. Like it's going to take us so long. And I don't know if we'll even see it in my lifetime, but it just means creating spaces where like the first thing that comes to your mind isn't the fact that they're like a person of color. You acknowledge, like, you know, we obviously still acknowledge that they are because people have moved through different experiences in life. It's not this whole like I don't see color thing.
I know.
It's a weird balance.
I love how how the wording on that has changed, because like I remember growing up, people being like, I don't see color, and that being like a thing that you were like proud of, but like now it's like, no, that's arrogant as fuck.
Yeah, totally.
It's about seeing in color. It's about seeing the richness and the shades and all the diversity that exists here and acknowledging that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So yeah, like I think your question is like, it's a really good question. I don't actually know if I fully have the answer to it, and I don't know if it's something that we'll see in my lifetime, but I think it just means like creating spaces where like everybody sees themselves represented and never has to question, their deservingness to be there, because everybody is deserving to be there,
whether or not they belong.
Yeah.
What if you were to have like any message to like the generalized white audience listening to this podcast or watching here? Like, what would you say that they like? What can people do to help further these ideas and to help kind of bring this diversity, inclusion, equity into the outdoor spaces, and not just outdoor spaces, but like everywhere within their lives in the city, within their corporate structures, within their, like everywhere.
Be willing to like get uncomfortable and be willing to like take a seat so that somebody else can stand, like I feel like so many people.
You mean stand so somebody else can take a seat?
Yeah, or like take a seat so that somebody else can stand and share their voice.
Oh, okay. I was thinking like around a round table. Yeah. You were talking like auditorium setting.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Kind of.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, yours works too. But yeah, it's just like I feel like a lot of people are like, I value like diversity, equity, and inclusion, but they don't want to give up any aspect of like the privilege that they've already owned in life so that somebody else can have an opportunity. And I think that's like asks people to get uncomfortable. It asks them to like question their privilege. It asks people to like, maybe give up things that they haven't earned in life, things that were just given to them. And so I think like what I can, a message I have for people is just like, look at your friend groups, like look at who you go out and recreate with, look at like your work groups and ask yourself like who's there and who's not, and how can you bring other people into the fold authentically, and like how can you like really connect with other folks and like just diversify the voices that you have at your tables, the experiences that you have, because again, like life has set us up to like we were saying earlier, like follow that like one path, like you grow up skiing at the age of 2, you're around other people who have skied since they were 2, you all make the same decisions to go to university, or you all make the same decisions to go and take a gap year. Then you all go and plant trees together, and then you all move to Squamish.
You're hitting so many stereotypes on the head, and you're all just kind of within your own white little echo chamber. Exactly. White liberal. Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly important thing for everybody of all walks of life to consider. Yeah. Yeah. Just consider the decisions you made and maybe even didn't make that got you to where you are. Well, and you were saying like the things that were given to you. I think a lot of that which is, quote, given to people of privilege isn't necessarily even acknowledged as given. Yeah. So it's like being able to take a step back and recognize the privileges that got you to where you were, that were like subconscious or whatever it may be, like the fact that like you walked into a McDonald's and was able to get a job at 15 without showing a resume because you were white, and not like like there are like so many little things within this society that we live in that like you don't even think of and you take for granted. Totally. You got a job in your second year of college because your uncle worked at this accounting firm. Right. Yeah. Or like you were able to take a gap year because you didn't have to worry about, money or scholarships or things like that. Like there's just like very small things that are rooted that other people don't necessarily have like the option to have those same experiences. And that's important to acknowledge. Totally. Awesome. Cool. Anything else? I don't think so. Heck yeah. Thanks for coming on. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Yeah. I'm so happy to have been here. Yeah. And we got to do it twice. I know. At least part of it twice. Yeah. I feel like it was better the second time. I think so too. Yeah. That sure was a fun little conversation, huh? I'm going to throw a link to Inclusivity in the show notes here so you can check that out and support Indra and all the great work that she's doing. And if you're enjoying this podcast, which I really, truly hope you are, you can do me a solid by liking it and sharing it around however it is that you feel it's best to share it around. And if you want to support this podcast as well as all those quirky, fun little videos you find on social media that help educate you and inspire you to become engaged in the outdoor world, you can do that at nerdyaboutnature.com, where you can become a Patreon supporter, which is a really great thing that helps give me the financial stability so I can afford to put more time and energy into this type of content, doing the research, doing the advocacy that you're all enjoying so much. So yeah, thank you all again so much for joining me on this Nerdy About Nature Podchat series thing. Got a couple great guests lined up for the next few episodes here, so stay tuned and hope to catch you outside. Cheers.